All good?
They'll let me play tennis this coming weekend. By the way, we haven't changed a bit. Not a bit. We all look the same.
I don't know. I was 30 pounds heavier. You look younger. Congratulations.
It's nice to be here. I appreciate it very much, and appreciate CNBC for having me.
Well, we are thrilled. I miss your partner.
I miss you too. That was a great show, by the way.
Yeah, it was. We had some good stuff because we disagree. Now, look, 5 years ago, you were here. You were interviewing Tim Geithner.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And I want to know, how does it feel to be interviewed now rather than doing the interviewing?
Oh, it feels fine. It feels great. I've done quite a lot of this, and I have to, I guess the little secret, maybe it's not a secret, I'm honored to have this job. Whatever one thinks of POTUS, for me it's a great honor. I've known him for a very long time, interviewed him many times on CNBC, on radio, but I kind of look at it, it's not so much a job, it's an honor.
Okay.
I mean, I served in the White House OMB long time ago, 35 years plus. This is a more senior position. Probably, Jimmy, it's the most fun I've ever had, if you want to know the truth.
Even though we know, by your own admission, there are various factions within.
Oh, yes.
And you have to get the president's attention. You have to keep the president's attention. What happens if he ends up not agreeing with you?
You win a few and you lose a few in these jobs, like anything else. Sometimes you agreed with me. Right. Sometimes we didn't agree. Look, I will say this. President Trump has been very open, very accessible to me. I see him quite a bit during the day, lots of meetings. Sometimes you get an afternoon call, come downstairs and talk about one thing or another. Sometimes you're traveling on the airplane. He's just been great. He's open, and in meetings with 5 or 6 or 8, who knows, people, he'll go to me. Larry, what do you think? And I tell him. It's my job to tell him.
Even when say, Larry, what do you think? We're having a big fight with China.
Well, it's, of course, I like that fight with China. I don't necessarily agree with all the trade tactics. We'll talk about that some. But my point is, he really enjoys the back and forth, to his credit. I think he's greatly underrated in that respect. He thinks and processes. He loves facts, figures, charts. He's very attentive. When he disagrees, he'll let you know, and know on certain terms. But look, on the whole, I mean, obviously I helped draft the tax and economic stuff during the campaign. I mean, we agree on almost everything. And where we don't agree, we talk it through. And he's been just wide open and accessible to me, and I just love that. And I will say this, the great thing about the National, I'm an assistant to the President, National Economic Council. We have our fingers in everything. That's what makes this really fun job. Every darn thing under the sun, including stuff about which I know virtually nothing, and I have a crackerjack staff to help teach me. So, except for Kudlow and Kramer, Jimmy, this is the most fun I've ever had.
I want to bring it back to Kudlow and Kramer. Why we ended up having such a great time is we're both serious optimists.
I think
serious, rigorous optimists.
I think so.
And I know, Larry, you must be thinking the way that Brian Moynihan did the other day when he was on Mad Money. He's talking 4% GDP.
Yeah.
And we're all confused, and you're the economist. How do you have a flat yield curve, 4% GDP, and have so many people who are gloomy?
What's interesting about all that, it looks like it's 4-ish. I know nothing more than you know at this point informationally, but it could be higher. I'd be thrilled if it was 3+, because that was our baseline. Everybody yelled at me during the campaign, after the campaign, and when I came into this office. Oh, you'll never get 3, you'll never get 3, including many dear friends of mine in the Democratic Party, who I respect enormously. We are getting 3, and it may be 4 for a quarter or 2. It may be plus, I don't know, but that's all to the good. Literally millions more people are working. I mean, if you can't, you go into these jobs, what's the key point? The key point, in my judgment, the best way I can help the country is get the economy strong and prosperous. I mean, you've got millennials out there. I'm just going to depart for 1 second
No,
to your
come
question.
on.
Then I want to come
We're
back
partners.
to your GDP.
The old days.
Yes, exactly.
I know now we're not adversaries. Let's put it that way.
You've got kids, millennials, etc., some of whom are working in the White House in junior positions, who have never seen a full-fledged, long-lasting prosperity. Honestly. And they don't know what I'm talking about.
They must think it's about to roll over at every minute.
Every minute. I mean, they just won't believe it. It's not that they're cynics. They've just never seen it. We haven't had one in 20 years, okay? You and I professionally grew up, maybe I was through the stagflationary 70s, but the 80s and 90s under both parties were fabulous prosperities. Right. And to me, that's the game. You go into these things, that's what you want to do. Do whatever you believe is best to generate a long-lived prosperity. You know, there's 155 million Americans working. I believe we can get that up to 160 million or even better. We haven't had any productivity. I believe we can do that through taxes and regulation. That's why you do these things. In other words, you want to leave it better than you got it.
But at the same time, you've never been a fan of a gigantic budget deficit, and that's what a lot of people feel we're faced with. And I know the issue is, can we grow out of this? And you and I are both pro-growth. But isn't, Larry, even if you're pro-growth, the numbers are so staggering. The deficit is so daunting.
Well, I don't know. You know, yeah, gigantic deficits are not good. And we're going to run, as a share of GDP, we're going to run 4 or 5%. That's not, I've seen worse. I mean, in the Reagan years, in the beginning, right, you know, you cut taxes, the first order is you lose some revenues, no question. But it's like investing in a business. You may have to borrow to make a good investment. I don't mean cash flow daily. I mean a good long-term investment. And I see the same thing happening now. The Trump tax cuts, yes, we will lose some revenues in the very short run. I believe we'll get it back and more. We're going to have OMB mid-year review coming out soon. I'm not here to put the numbers out. Mick Mulvaney will do that. But the point is, yeah, you'll get your 4 and 5% GDP. It's far, far from the worst thing I've ever seen.
Then do you think taxes should be cut again?
Well,
I know there's a budding tax cut 2.0 movement.
That's correct. In fact, we had quite a good meeting yesterday on that very subject, the president back from Europe.
With the president.
And we're mulling over a number of very good options. It'll be very pro-growth options.
Capital gains?
And we'll fit into...
what's left?
I don't want to go too far on this.
Well, but is it bracket? Is it acceleration?
Not out of the bag. I will say this. A lot of people, and again, the policy is not yet formed, okay? So I'm not letting anything out. But there are a number of people on the Hill, for example, who would like to make a lot of the tax cuts, the individual tax cuts, permanent.
Okay.
Permanent. So not only did we have a successful tax cut, but we want to keep it that way. And then you may see, frankly, not only a 2.0, but you may see a 3.0 and you may see a 4.0. There's a lot of I'm an old Reagan tax reformer.
Right.
Lower the rates, broaden the base. A lot of that was done in the last bill. Much needs to be done going forward. So some of those ideas are circulating and I think will come to fruition. Let me just go back, though. The GDP thing, look, I'm not an academic guy, but I just pose this thought to people. We are, in some respects, we are the 9th year of a recovery, all right? From the middle of 2009.
It's allegedly long in the tooth for these younger people who are around you in the White House.
That's right. And they've never seen prosperity. So here's a thought, and I may be wrong about this, but just to think about it. When I was a young economist at the Fed and Wall Street, it was usually labeled by economists of all stripes, 2% growth was a growth recession. You follow? It was not a recovery. It was not really an expansion. It was called a growth recession. It may have been Arthur Oken years ago. I don't know who coined that term. So just consider this possibility. We have been in a growth recession since the middle of 2009. And you can go back further if you like, okay? Now, if we get the kind of numbers that you're suggesting and I'm suggesting, we've already seen some of that, I mean, on the quarterly basis, four-quarter change. We're almost at 3%. We're going to go right to 3% this year. Look, that may be the beginning of the recovery. So this may not be so long in the tooth. You may actually
You're saying that everything could have been a prelude to what's about to occur now?
You know, I noticed Jason Furman was on this morning on Squawk, and he's a friend. He's a terribly smart guy. He may disagree, and I get that. But consider the possibility that a capital spending boom that we never really had, okay, widespread capital returning back to the United States. You know, this is the hottest country right now in the world. Trillions of dollars are coming here. It's leaving Europe. It's leaving China. It's leaving a lot of places. We've never seen these kind of inflows probably since the 1990s. It is possible that a, quote, real business growth cycle is right there in front of us for the next 4, 5, 6 years. That's a possibility, and I just want you to be open to that we have it. You know, growth recession is one thing. Full-fledged recovery where people not working can work, and cap spending that never took place, long-term projects now will be put into place, and the attitude towards business has improved enormously. Think about that. You could have a run here of 5 or 6 years that the rest of it, as you said, is prelude.
Well, I think the stock market is agreeing with you.
Well,
but at the same time, Larry, if that's the case and we're that strong, is this not the time to take on the Chinese? Do you think we are in a trade war with them? And do you think if you think we are, is it winnable?
I think it's a significant trade dispute. Okay.
More of a conflict than a war, so to speak.
This is pure Kudlow. It's what I do.
We love you for it.
And we've always done it. Look, I'm not a big fan of tariffs. You know that. I don't like blanket tariffs. Art Laffer and I wrote an op-ed piece before I lost my job at CNBC where we didn't like the Steele National Security 232. Okay, but I have been a long-term critic of China. It's all as a matter of public record on the tape. And I think the president is doing exactly the right thing here. This should have been done years ago. The world trading system is broken. The World Trade Organization is broken. We just had this discussion at the G7. B, the biggest culprit is China, and particularly since it entered the WTO, which was about the year 2000, as I recall. China has, they're still labeled an undeveloped third world country by the WTO. That's nonsense. Therefore, they're trying to use most favored nations to have high tariffs, high non-tariff barriers, which is the new game in town for Europe particularly, but China is guilty of that. They do, in fact, steal our intellectual property left and right. They do, in fact, have a forced transfer of technology from many American companies operating. Right, it comes from the joint ventures. You're precisely right. And they will not allow full American ownership, which would I mean, right now, I mean, I've had long discussions. I'm not a China hand or China expert, but I'm getting up to speed rapidly, talking to people in business as well as you open a company on a joint venture basis in a Chinese province, okay?